Hello everybody, this is Gregory with Permanent Weight Loss Made Easy, where there should be no hesitance in your weight loss and in your weight maintenance. Today I'm going to give you some tips on what type of therapist you need to do the deep work to get to achieve permanent weight loss. Now before I begin, if you need help with weight loss, contact me through the Clarity FM link found here in the episode notes. As you guys know, I've lost over 100 pounds and I've kept it up for 30 plus years. I have 2 books on Amazon, which you might want to check out. My podcast, The Awakened Man, which has been around since 2017, very health related. I also have a movie podcast called The Cinema Rag, which has almost 200 episodes. Check that out. And lastly, if you appreciate my content, there is a link for PayPal. And also, by the way, I have a website that's got hundreds of recipes that might be useful to you. So I've talked about, look, 80% of people who lose more than 50 pounds will gain it back. Yo-yo dieting is pervasive. Any of you who've lost weight, most of you guys have gained it back. Even in my 32 plus years, there were 3 times where I gained about 20 pounds but lost it again. So yo-yo dieting is pretty common. Now, one of the reasons why we yo-yo diet is because we have a disordered relationship with food. And this is something that a lot of overweight people don't want to confront. They want to blame it on a metabolic syndrome or a glandular problem or all this nonsense, instead of looking at the mirror and be like, no, I have a disordered relationship with food. I eat to soothe the pain, to numb the pain. And most of this is born from childhood trauma. Either you suffer from neglect or abuse, and so you turn to food at a very young age to soothe and numb the pain. And you can throw in alcohol as well later on. And this is what you do, and it's your go-to. It's a habit that you have. And as much as you know it's bad for you, continue to do it because that's all you've known. So in order to permanently lose the weight, you have to go back to that childhood trauma and address it, and therefore have an ordered relationship with food. Like we talk about all the time, like a dog. Dog, oh, hungry, eat. No longer hungry, stop eating. That's what we have to do. Therapy is normally required for this. So what are some of my tips for getting the right therapist? Well, look, this is hard, and it's hard and it's good. Since COVID, we've been fortunate in that a lot of therapy, because there's always money to be made. So the industry, whatever it be, Hollywood or weight loss or Zoom or any industry, Uber Eats, is going to pivot. And so one of the ancillary positives of COVID was that therapists obviously couldn't see people because we were essentially in quarantine, depending on what state you were at. So you saw a lot of online outlets. So you can go to places, and I'm not going to sponsor any of these. I'm not going to mention them, but you can just Google online therapy. And there's a lot of large websites now that will offer a flat fee for you to see a therapist, $30 a month, and you have unlimited therapy. And I think these are great for you. Or if you prefer not to have a Zoom session with somebody, you can still do face-to-face, especially if you live in a large town. That's really up to you. I would tell you the number one thing to look at is what they're qualified in. Like, you don't need a marriage and family counselor to be helping you with this. You need somebody that's specific to the problems that you have. So really, in this regard, I would tell you, don't go to the Freudian psychoanalyst. They're going to be like, what was your childhood like? And it is important, right? Because you're really dealing with childhood trauma. I would tell you that you need to gravitate toward 2 types of specialists. Addiction specialists, because on one level, as much as it drives me crazy when people say, I'm addicted to beer, I'm addicted to food, I'm addicted to porn, or I have some proclivities, or I was born this way, because it takes away accountability. Nobody's shoving the food in your throat. We're making the choice. Addiction specialists will have a certain perspective that a marriage and family counselor wouldn't have, or somebody that deals with other types, like let's say anxiety issues, or some of the more peculiar hardcore diseases like schizophrenia or bipolar. So I would tell you to go to an addiction specialist. I'd also tell you probably CBT or cognitive behavioral therapy is the best in this regards for a couple of reasons. So the psychoanalysts love to have you come 3-4 sessions a week, and they just talk about your childhood all the time. Now, a lot of you can't afford that. It's expensive. If you're doing the monthly ones, it's different. But if you're going in for counseling, this can be very expensive. And cognitive behavioral therapy is good because it's shorter sessions and essentially addresses you changing your thought process. So anytime you have an idea come into your mind, normally it's negativistic, CBT will help you change that thought. So when that negative thought comes in, maybe your idea to binge eat comes in, or some self-loathing comes in, you'll have the tools to not get triggered to go binge eat. So I think that CBT is a good route for you as well. So I would look at CBT and addiction. In regards to online, you have to be careful because a lot of these websites will offer you this unlimited things, but they're going to give you essentially LPCs, licensed professional counselors, or lower level people who just maybe have a master's degree. And it's not like they can't have a certain perspective that someone with a PsyD or Doctor of Psychology or a PhD has, but ideally you want to have the higher level professionals. And so just understand, like online therapy, there's typically going to be more of a glut of the low level mental health people, the therapists, and not a lot of the high level. So just understand that. The other thing is going back to childhood trauma. So the psychoanalyst will really focus on the childhood trauma. And this is what you really need to do, because if you go to a CBT isn't necessarily going to have you focus on the childhood trauma. CBT is like, okay, this is your negativistic thinking, we need to change it. So I would tell you that given that your childhood is so pervasive in your reasoning for why you have disordered eating, that I would tell you that the best thing to do is probably go to an addiction specialist, because the addiction specialist will do a combination of CBT and do a combination of childhood, because they understand that the addiction typically stems from childhood stuff. So that's my advice to you is, if money is not an object and you live in a large city, I would tell you to go in-person therapy at least weekly to an addiction specialist. If money is an object, then I would tell you to go to the online ones and just get someone who specializes in addiction, and understand that you might have some low-level people. And I would tell you too, and I mentioned in the episodes, like, why do we have fat trainers, or why are you going to pick people who are young and never been overweight? There is something to be said about having therapists who are recovering addicts, because they can get into your mind. See, trainers who are 22 and cut can't get into your mind. They've never been fat, or they've never been old, or they've never dealt with love handles or all these things. They've had this jock body their whole life, so they can't relate to you. So that's one of the reasons why you have an outlet like this, is because I can relate to you. I was there. I know what it was like. So when it comes to therapy, I would recommend try to find a therapist who has that experience as well. But the number one thing is find an addiction specialist. Guys, post in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Remember, you're not going to have permanent weight loss without the permanent, or I should say the calorie in, calorie out mentality of just exercising too much and then getting home and binging. All these stopgap approaches and measures, they are not going to lead to healthy permanent weight loss until you go back into your childhood trauma. Guys, post in the comments, subscribe if you haven't done so, hit the notification button if you haven't done so. Until next time, take care, God bless, and pray.